It's July, the middle of winter. Malcolm Douglas, with his dog Jowdy and companion Craig Winter, is leaving for the Great Sandy Desert in Western Australia. Malcolm, with his love of adventure, will spend the following month travelling the loneliest track in Australia, the Canning Stock Route. Originally surveyed in 1906 by Alfred Canning to move cattle from the Kimberley cattle runs to the markets in the south, it's now one of Australia's greatest outback four-wheel drive challenges.
G'day. Now we've just arrived in Wiluna at the bottom of the Canning Stock Route. By the way, Wiluna is the only place that I've seen alcoholic crows outside the pub. You'll see them in a minute. Now, we want to go from Wiluna all the way through the Great Sandy Desert right up to Halls Creek along the Canning Stock Route. Now this Canning Stock Route is about 2,000 kilometres, and it's one of the longest and most arduous four-wheel drive journeys in Australia. Not the sort of journey that you want to tackle unless you've got a top vehicle and you've got plenty of confidence in your own ability. Most people follow Canning's trek, the famous surveyor who went through and opened up this country, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to go from well to well, all the way through from Wiluna to Halls Creek. But on our way out of town, we're going to call it the Emu Farm, and that's quite a sight.
Wiluna boasts a checkered and colourful history. Gold was discovered in 1896, and in the 1930s the town population had grown to 9,000. Then by the 60s it was practically deserted, and it survives today, a rough outback town. The centre of social activities, the pub, where even the crows are heavy drinkers, quenching their thirst from discarded cans. 20 kilometres out is the Emu Farm, owned and operated by the local Aboriginal community with assistance from European advisors. With the growing demand for emu leather throughout the world, this new industry could become a multi-million-dollar money spinner for Australia. The adult birds are separated for breeding, and it's not easy moving them from one paddock to another. Established with government assistance on 200 hectares in 1976, the farm produces exquisite leather for high-fashion garments. Eventually, 400 breeding birds will produce 1,000 chicks a year. Breeding takes place during the cooler months, and as soon as the female lays her clutch, she loses interest in her offspring. The male incubates the eggs until they hatch about 56 days later. He's a nervous and aggressive father, protecting the chicks by day and brooding them at night. In the wild, male parental care can last up to 18 months, but at the farm, the older chicks are penned together and fed daily. Growing rapidly, within 12 months, each bird will be worth $400. Although only in the experimental stages, emu farming could soon become a valuable national resource. A small tanning plant's been built, and after months of experimentation, a high-quality leather's been developed. Overseas buyers are clamouring to purchase this unique product. There's a use for every part of the emu: skin, meat, feathers and oil. The exotic leathers made into high-fashion garments and quality leather goods. A unique skill is the carving of emu eggs. The layers of shell are painstakingly scraped away to create these classic works of art. Lester Redmond, a young Wongai Aborigine, is becoming one of Australia's finest emu egg artists, and his latest works demand high prices. Back in Wiluna, Malcolm advises the police of his plans and heads out along a well-graded road. There are no signs and local knowledge is essential. 20 minutes later, they swing north along station tracks. The first day it's easy to get bushed, for this is grazing country and station service roads turn off in all directions. From here on, there are no roads and no towns, only a winding track for nearly 2,000 kilometres to Halls Creek. The stock route was pushed through to move cattle from the Kimberley south through the Great Sandy Desert to the goldfields, where beef was fetching high prices. The Kimberley pastoralists were desperate to cash in on this lucrative market. With the introduction of the cattle tick from Java, the cattlemen could no longer ship their stock south, and then it was discovered that the ticks could be killed off if the cattle were walked through the harsh, dry conditions of the desert. So in 1906, Alfred Canning, a government surveyor, was appointed to lead a party to map a suitable route through the desert, to locate water, and finally to sink wells so that the cattle could be moved south without perishing. At the time, it appeared to be an almost impossible task, as earlier exploration had suffered tremendous hardship and tragedy. In May, Canning left the tiny township of Day Dawn with 8 men, 23 camels and 2 ponies. 4 years later, the stock route was operational, an incredible feat that will never be equalled. It's now many years since cattle last came down, and today only travellers with a keen sense of adventure retrace Canning's epic journey. For a time, the track winds over open Gibber Plains. To pinpoint their exact position, the men locate a Department of Interior marker and check it against the map. These markers are found at intervals along the route and are very reassuring for travellers. Across the plains, brilliant Sturt's desert pea blooms profusely after recent rain. Canning's wells have fallen into a state of disrepair. Some are now little more than a depression in the ground. Starting at number 1 near Wiluna, they finish at the most northerly, well 54. Well 6 at Pierre Springs lies disintegrating under the harsh desert sun. After Canning's initial 2-year stint, he headed out again with 70 camels loaded with food and 100 tons of construction materials. Every item of hardware for the wells was carried in. The desert winter temperatures, usually mild during the day, drop to freezing at night, with early morning frosts common. Malcolm's always up before sunrise, but Jowdy, snug in her own swag, is a slow starter on chilly mornings. Until recently, it was difficult to locate the actual track, but with increasing traffic, it's now clearly defined all the way.
Well, it's mogo time in the desert, and I've just pulled up at our takeaway department. This is the desert grevillea, and it's better than a cup of tea. As the blossoms open up, it exudes this very sweet nectar. And it's beautiful. Very filling. In the old days, the Aboriginal women used to feed a lot of this grevillea nectar to their children.
The sticky sweet syrup oozes out when the blossom's squeezed. To many people, the desert's an arid region, devoid of life. But there are many living creatures, even if the only signs of their presence are transitory tracks in the sands.
Now, the biggest track in the desert is also the most recent, and it's a camel track. And right in front of me is a very large camel that's gone along the Canning stock route. Here's his great footprint here, bang, bang, bang. Now, crossing the camel track is a very recent dingo track. Now, both of these are very recent because it's been windy the last few days. There's very little sand over this track, and the dingo has come this way and gone across there. So with luck, as we go north along the Canning stock route, we're going to see camels, and with luck, we might also see a dingo.
To the north, the dunes encountered are higher and more numerous. Then the sand gives way to rocky escarpment, the Durbar Hills. High above the plains is a stone cairn built by Canning's party so long ago. After a short, steep climb, Craig looks up the names of recent travellers to this remote part of Australia. The Durbar Hills, with their tranquil camping spots, lie in the most picturesque section of the stock route. At dawn, the cliffs glow with brilliant colour. Cutting deep into the hills is the Kilagurra Gorge, an idyllic place. For countless generations, this serene retreat was sanctuary to the Aborigines. Here, the white-trunked gums grow tall, watered by permanent pools of crystal clear water. For the desert tribesmen, these gorges evoked a sacred and mystical reverence. On the walls, mythical dreamtime figures are fading with the passing of the years. To the east lies Durbar Springs, once an important Aboriginal camping ground and a favourite stopping-off place on the old stock route. On the high rock wall, drovers trekking south with cattle etched their initials and names. HST 1906 are the initials of H.S. Trotman, the first European to enter the gorge and a member of Canning's original team. Malcolm and Craig are now in the heart of the Gibson Desert, and it's slow going even in four-wheel drive. For the drovers going south in the early days, it was indescribably arduous as they urged the cattle over sand dune after sand dune, praying that they would make it to the next well. Ahead, camels. These extraordinary creatures, with their loping gait and huge flat feet, were brought into Australia to carry the early explorers, such as Burke and Wills. Before the advent of motorised transport, over 4,000 camels were working in Western Australia. Now they're of no further use and running wild. They're an amazing sight, but a bit of a hazard when they hog the road. Wild camels are destructive, breaking down the desert trees for food. Ecologically, they could become a problem if their numbers continue to increase. By 1929, many of the wells were in need of repair, and a team was sent out to restore them. Despite appearances, Well 23 is still usable over 50 years later. Malcolm's interested in the whip pole. Camel power dragged a rope over the pulley, lifting the bucket to the surface. Even today, much of the desert oak timbering around the shaft is still in good condition. This is the timber that was carried to the wells by camels. A kilometre from Well 23 is the fuel dump for stock route travellers. Supplies must be arranged months before an expedition begins, and the fuel's carted out by Bill Shepherd from Mount Newman. With extra tanks, Malcolm's Land Rover carries 600 litres of diesel. But with the vehicle fully laden, progress is slow. The loose sand on top of the dunes is tough going. It's sometimes quicker to winch over rather than make several attempts to get across. A tyre buried in the sand is a solid winching anchor.
Now here's something that I want to show you. Under this bush, just lift it back. Here we are. Come on, mate. Isn't that just fantastic? Look at that, the little thorny devil, Moloch horridus. the horrible devil. But I don't think he's horrible, I think he's absolutely beautiful. He's got the cutest face, and he's got this incredible armour. These spikes, just settle down mate please for a minute. These spikes are really quite soft. Down towards the back here they're hard, and on his stomach he's even got the spikes. Now the sad thing about these little devils is that people driving around this country now find them, and what do? They go back to their vehicle, get a can or a box, pick them up, put them in the can or the box, and take them all the way back to the city. And of course they slowly die, because these little characters only eat ants. They don't eat anything else. So please, if you see them in the desert, don't pick them up. Just look at them, take a picture. You can hold it in your hand like this for a minute or two, just gently, it's not going to worry him. But then just put him down and leave him be. But please, don't take them home. I'm going to pop him back now. Here we are. Quite harmless. Often, when you come up to them, all they do is just drop their head in the sand like that. There he is. He'll stay like that till I go away.
The next well of any interest is number 26. Completely restored by a team of 25 volunteers in 1983, it now affords a welcome supply of good water halfway along the route. Canning used the desert tribesmen to show him where the natural wells were situated. This saved Canning many months of work locating water. In his official report, he states that Aborigines were rounded up and used as guides. Another camel, and it too insists on having right of way. For several kilometres, the camel lopes along, until in desperation, Malcolm finally gets past. A few kilometres off the track, they locate well 31. Its sad condition is typical of so many of the wells along the Canning stock route. And well 32 is also in a state of decay. All the sand dunes along the entire route run east to west, so each one must be tackled head-on. Canning estimated that there are 1,800 sand hills along the length of the stock route. On the edge of a small clay pan is a mysterious well where few people dare to camp.
This is well 37, and it's the most notorious well along the entire route. It was here in 1910 that the first drovers were bringing cattle down from Wiluna near Halls Creek right through to Wiluna when they were speared. The two drovers were Thompson and Shoesmith. The bodies were left near here, and it wasn't until the next drover was bringing cattle down, and that was Tom Cole, that he found the bodies, and he buried them nearby up on the sand dunes. And after that terrible start, the Kimberley drovers wouldn't bring cattle down the canning stock route. After all this work, 4 years of surveying and sinking these wells, the stockmen wouldn't bring cattle down because they're too fearful of the desert Aborigines. And then in 1922, the Loch Oil Exploration Company was surveying this area for oil, and one of their men, W. McLennan, was camped in his swag nearby, and again the desert Aborigines crept up at night and clubbed him to death. And after that, this well had a terrible reputation. It's said even today by the locals that the cattle still run away from here. Even today the Kimberley drovers still dread this place, and people travelling along the route now refer to well 37 as the haunted well. Just what we need. A very flat tyre on top of a very soft sand dune. That creates a lot of problems because we just can't jack it up quickly, whip this one off, put the other one on because of this very soft sand. What we've got to do is get our big jack off the pack rack, jack it up from the bull bar here, then with wood underneath, make a bit of a base, put the other jack under there, very carefully lift that front diff, dig all this sand away, and providing it doesn't all collapse, we can get the other tyre on and do it up. It's quite a tricky operation. It's getting late, so if we don't get into it, it'll be dark.
While Craig starts work on the tyre, Malcolm sets up his portable solar cell to charge his camera batteries. Malcolm and Craig work quickly to replace the flat. Changing tyres without a firm base is dangerous. The loose sand can give way, and if the vehicle drops, it's a major job jacking it up again. In the morning, the puncture must be mended. Breaking the tyre from the rim's easy. You just drive over it. With the puncture fixed or a new tube inserted, the tyre can be inflated again, using an extra valve adapter on a hose to release the extra air pressure stored in the spare. The men pass through large stands of desert oak, the timber used by canning for the original well construction. At well 39, the water's brackish and unpalatable. But this doesn't worry the wildlife. Wherever there's water in the desert, the gregarious zebra finches are at home. Where the birds are able to enter the wells, the water's soon polluted. Malcolm's always up early to get the damper cooking for breakfast. Today, he'll be going off looking for animals.
It's early morning and the sun's just risen, and I'm out on top of one of the sand dunes. Now in the desert, especially in the cooler times of the year, you don't see many animals, but the evidence is here every morning. All the tracks are on the sand dunes, and most of the animals live in holes. Now I'm going to move around, pick up some of these tracks and dig out some of these animals to show you.
Malcolm soon finds a fresh track. A blue-tongue lizard's not far off. The blue-tongue's only means of defence is all bluff. They fiercely display a vivid blue tongue, hiss and inflate their bodies. Sadly, these harmless reptiles are often killed in mistaken belief that they're deadly. Another common species of the arid lands is the spiny-tailed monitor, a favoured food for the desert Aborigines. Its powerful clawed feet are used for digging and climbing, and the spiky tails used when the lizard wants to wedge itself in its burrow or under a rock. The various species of dragon, inoffensive little creatures, are found all over the desert. During the warmer months, they scavenge over the dunes. Jowdy's after lizards too, but they're far too agile for her. Malcolm spots some fine wood dust at the base of a dead acacia, and immediately he's after his favourite bush tucker, a witchetty grub. Many people are confused by the different types of wood grubs, but the edible species have short legs near the head. The rest of the body is cream to golden and free of hair or developed legs. Cooked in the coals or eaten raw, they're delicious. There's not a living creature that can travel across the sand without leaving a trace, not even a beetle. When alarmed, this species digs into the sand, constantly emitting an extraordinary buzz to scare off predators. Jowdy's attracted by the ear-splitting sound, but the terrible noise alarms her and she backs off while it quickly disappears. The next area Malcolm wants to explore is around Well 40.
I've just walked up on the first sand hill behind Well 40, and I've come to the grave of Michael Tobin. Now, Michael Tobin was a boring expert with Canning's expedition, and on the return journey from Halls Creek, they came to this area, and Canning and his men were stopping. Tobin saw an Aboriginal, and he rode up on his horse, dismounted, and as he walked up to the chap, the Aboriginal fixed a spear to his woomera, threw the spear, and it went into Tobin's shoulder. Then the Aboriginal took off. Tobin followed, the Aboriginal turned around, fixed another spear to the woomera, and threw it at Tobin for the second time. And at the same time as the spear hit Tobin, Tobin was down on his knee and fired his rifle, and he killed the Aboriginal instantly. And 1 a.m. the following morning, Tobin also died. It was a terrible shock to Canning and his men. They brought Tobin up and they buried him on this sand ridge. And later on, this marble cross was brought to the area and fixed here. And it says, "Sacred to the memory of Michael Tobin, spared the 6th of the 4th, 07, 1907. And what is interesting about this cross is a galvanised sheeting that's been fixed on the exterior. And that was put there to stop the desert tribesmen from chipping the marble to get little flakes off for their spear tips.
Well 42 lies serene in the sun, an oasis in the desert, attracting wildlife to its permanent water. The comical galahs with their pastel pink on grey plumage are an endless delight to watch. The budgerigars wait nervously for the galahs to finish drinking before risking a quick flight to the water's edge. For a second or two they dabble, then it's back to the safety of the treetops. Patrolling the open ground near the well is a magnificent dingo. he spots some rubbish left by thoughtless travellers and casually leaves his mark on the litter. Jowdy, a female kelpie, shows more than a passing interest in the dingo's message. After recent heavy rain, there's an abundance of grass seed, and the budgerigars congregate in enormous flocks to feed. The domestic budgies that give so much pleasure to people all around the world have developed through selective breeding from these wild budgerigars of the Australian inland. There are few sights more fascinating than the swift flight of a flock of budgerigars as they twist and turn in unison, then land to scurry through the grass feeding. Malcolm spots an aristocrat of the desert, the Australian or Nankeen kestrel. Normally a solitary bird, it will eat well with so many budgerigars around. The men are now heading for the northern section of the stock route, where the Bredon Hills dominate the landscape.
Now in between all the sand dunes, there are pockets of rock and occasionally these dry creek beds. Now, if we walk along these creek beds, we can find quite a few holes. And I know what you're thinking, yabbies. Well, they're not yabbies. I'm going to dig one out and I'm going to show you. There's a hole here, going down. There's one here. There's one here. It's going to take me a while to dig it out. Here he is. Oh, look out. You wouldn't expect one of those out here. Hundreds of kilometres from the sea, a crab. But this is the freshwater or inland crab. I'm just going to move out into the sunlight to have a good look at him.
This species is found from northern New South Wales right through to the Kimberley in Western Australia. The crabs can lie dormant underground for years, waiting for rain. Many a traveller's been startled to see large numbers of adult crabs crawling about when a heavy downpour breaks a long period of drought. Back on the stock route, the men reach well 49, and Malcolm, as usual, checks the quality of the water.
Now, a lot of these wells have gone salty, but some of them are still good. The water's still fairly fresh. I've just got this rope and one of our billies to show you how far down it is. There we go, there we go, there we go, there we go. Just about onto the water now. Righto. Here we are. Anyone like a shower? Here we are. And that looks like good water. Just try it out. That's very sweet water. Clean and very sweet. I think I'll have some more of that. Go and fill the billies up.
Beyond this spectacular breakaway country lies the Aboriginal community of Balgo. Here, Malcolm meets up with his old friend Dominic, a Kukadja tribesman. Whenever Malcolm's in this area, he always spends some time with Dominic, an expert tracker. Much can be learnt from his skills. Malcolm tells Dominic they'll spend 2 nights out bush. Get your swag ready to put on the pack rack. Dominic's mother is always sulky when her son goes walkabout. Although Malcolm spends up to 6 months of the year in the bush, he knows that he still has much to learn, and tribal Aborigines are the best teachers. Locating a goanna hole, Dominic explains to Malcolm that the goanna's gone and another lizard's now in residence. And it's a most unusual lizard too. A night skink, a nocturnal species. Its pupils are elliptical, an uncommon feature in skinks. Dominic explains to Malcolm that the Aborigines would only eat such a small lizard if they were very, very hungry. When there's plenty of food, the little lizard would be released. Dominic tracks down another one of his favourites. The blue-tongued lizard was part of the desert Aborigines' staple diet. While at Balgo, Malcolm also learns some new collecting techniques from the women, who are expert food gatherers. Today, they're digging up edible frogs.
Another two?
Ada mangor.
Oh, three.
Yeah, three.
Yeah.
Ada kutara doga.
Now, what are you going to do? You're going to eat him all this one?
Yeah,
or we put him
ngalkuna.
back?
Ngalkuna kuka.
You're going to, God, eat him like this?
Yeah.
Or cook him?
Palguna. Palguna.
You eat him raw or cook him?
Kuju pagadil kuna. Pandal kuna. Ngalkuna.
You cook him up
You wow.
and then eat him. You can't eat him like this now. You eat him like this?
Palguna.
You try him.
Palguna. Yeah. Rowan badida.
The raw one? Yeah, we got to cook him.
Kunka.
Well, he's cooking these frogs. Brook. Cooking them all up. Just cover them over with sand, eh? Just cover him over. Oh, these taste good.
Yeah.
Just leave him there. He won't take long. Ooh. Well, they've been on the coals about 2 minutes. Here we are. 1, 2, 7 there all together, eh? Well, here we have a gourmet meal, desert style. Frog's legs. I don't know what they're going to taste like, but we'll give it a try. What do we got to clean him up? Just open it up. It's hot. So just got to get that juice out. Oh, it's hot, isn't it? Just pull that part out, eh? Just clean him out. Very hot. We try him now. Eat a lot.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
I'll try anything once. Oh! I tell you what, they are very sweet. They are very nice. I'll have more than one. You can have 3 more, and I have 3 more. They are beautiful. You wouldn't believe it. In the early days when the people were walking around this desert country, they would not waste anything. As you can see in these frogs, it doesn't look very big, but there's a lot of juice there. And it's very nice. Just clean a little bit of the rubbish out of it. Second one. Don't worry about what it looks like. It's just beautiful. It's lovely. Anyone want to try some desert frog?
It takes the women only an hour or so to collect buckets of these delicacies.
Well, kuja gara inga wandinya. Yo wandinya nda. Ngai. All met.
The few lucky ones to escape will soon burrow deep into the sand again.
Yo.
From Balgo, Malcolm and Craig drive back onto the main road, and along the way they detour to one of the most unusual geological features in Australia, the Wolf Creek Crater. It's been accepted by most scientists that this almost circular structure was formed by a huge meteorite colliding with the Earth. At about 1,000 metres in diameter, it's the second largest meteorite crater in the world. To create such an enormous depression, a meteor weighing many thousands of tonnes and travelling in excess of 15 kilometres per second must have hit the Earth's crust with a massive explosion. Since the crater formed over 2 million years ago, it's been partially filled with sand. But the almost perfectly shaped walls still dominate the surrounding plains. The walls are extremely steep, a painful fact only realised when one has to climb back out of the crater to the rim. "1,800 kilometres from Wiluna, the men drive into the small township of Halls Creek and immediately report in at the police station.
Well, here we are in Halls Creek, and that was quite a trip. Now, Halls Creek was where Canning and his party stayed for the wet season after completing their initial survey of the stock route. And at the end of the wet, they returned through the desert all the way down to Wiluna and on to Perth. And not far from Halls Creek is a natural feature that Canning and his party didn't see, and that's the Bungle Bungles. Yes, you've probably never even heard of the Bungle Bungles. Well, it's an awe-inspiring natural feature, and I can guarantee that in a few years, the Bungle Bungles is going to be one of Australia's greatest tourist attractions. And when you do your trip around Australia, you'll want to go to the Bungle Bungles. So let's go out and have a look at them now.
The track to the Bungle Bungles is only negotiable by four-wheel drive vehicle. A superb olive python. Malcolm's fascinated by reptiles and immediately gives chase. Although non-venomous and placid, they should only be handled by experts. These snakes belong to the constrictor family, and this one's having a go at stopping the circulation in Malcolm's arm. After several hours of hard driving, this extraordinary natural wonder appears, rising abruptly from the surrounding lowlands. At close range, the weird sandstone towers, cliffs and domes become even more impressive. The Bungle Bungle massif, when it becomes well known to travellers and more accessible, will be as popular as Ayers Rock and the Olgas. Nowhere else in the world are there sandstone formations as complex and unique as these remarkable, almost bizarre landforms. 350 million years ago, sandstone deposits were pushed up from the sea, and erosion and weathering have formed towers and ridges, separated by narrow, sinuous valleys. The towers, commonly called beehives, have distinctive orange and black banding, formed by a thin skin of algae and layers of silicon. Beneath the skin is bright white sandstone. The Bungle Bungle is huge, covering 450 square kilometres. The fragile ecology of the area is being ruined by feral animals, and a concentrated effort is being made by the Department of Conservation and Land Management to exterminate these recently introduced pests. From the air, the sheer magnitude of the massif is awe-inspiring. After 350 million years, the Bungle Bungle is to become one of the great tourist attractions of Australia. Without proper management, this unique eminence could very quickly become an ecological disaster. Realising this, the Western Australian government is giving the whole area national park status to protect it for all time. But for now, Malcolm must move on. He's about to begin another adventure, travelling with the broom pearlers, seeking the elusive pearls along the magical pearling coast.